What's up, what's up, what's up, YouTube? It's your girl Bree, aka Kenya Lee, and as you can tell by the title, this is gonna be a nice little story time into a little bit of some of my background history and basically the story of how I got out of a double abusive situation. So yeah, let's just get right into it.
I'd rather be smoking weed whenever we breathe. Every time you kiss me, don't say that you miss me. Just come get me. Don't know why, just know I want to. Don't know why, just know I want you. I'd rather be breaking things, 'cause we can't see. We're too busy kissing.
Story about my dad. First and foremost, he's not my biological father. Basically what happened was my mom got pregnant by accident. It wasn't like a teenage mom thing. She was a teenage mom, mind you, but by the time I was born, she was 40. So I was accidental on the whole other spectrum of the plate. Like, we thought she was done. But so that happened, and at the time she was heavily addicted to certain things. So she was actually in jail at the later end of her pregnancy with me. So needless to say, she could not take care of me. And originally my sister was 18 at the time, wanted to adopt me, but the family said she was too young. So my cousin, actually, my gay cousin, who said he wanted children, wanted to adopt me, and everybody was cool with it. You know, I stayed in the family, all that stuff. They made their little arrangement. What I wasn't aware of at the time was that their original arrangement was that it was supposed to be like a temporary thing, and then once my mom got her shit together, I was supposed to go back. And then he ended up going back on that agreement. I was told a few years ago, actually. So yeah, but there's that. So that's how that happened. I was born in Huntsville, Alabama, but I moved here to Tennessee when I was like 1. Because he was going to school. So growing up, there was a lot of pressure on me to just be like the best at everything. Like, I had to be the smartest person in the classroom. I had to be the best person in whatever extracurricular I had. And it was, you expect like certain things like that from like a parental figure, but it was like the pressure that an adult would have on, like, trying to get this promotion to be able to provide for their family. Like, that sort of pressure to like pass a spelling test. But it was like anytime I did something wrong, it was like we had to make sure that I knew what I did was wrong. And it was like I couldn't live it down. It wasn't the usual like scolding for a good little hour or so, whatever. It wasn't like the usual spanking. It was like hours and hours. It'd be like whole night, first thing in the morning, bring it back up again the next day. Like, it was like I felt shitty going home almost, because it was like no matter what I did, it was wrong. All of it was wrong. And then I grew out of but I stopped getting the traditional whoopings and stuff when I was like 7. The last whooping I got, I was with my sister and nephews and stuff, and I had done something I had gotten a ball out of our little blow up pool, because my nephew had threw it in there by accident, and we weren't supposed to go in the pool, but he threw it in there and needed to get it. So I like tried to like step in and like reach for it, but like a little bit of it got the bottom of my long t-shirt thing that I had on. I got my ass beat, obviously, but that whooping I got actually left a scar on my legs. It was about like this long and like a diagonal across the front of my thigh. The scar is gone now because I was 7 at the time, so it's been like 18 years since then. So, but yeah, so that was the last like traditional whooping I got. After that, it was kind of that whole, I'm bigger than him now in size, if that makes sense. So it was, once I got up to that age, it was almost like I gotta make sure that I'm the authority in this. So instead of like the threats for the traditional whoopings, it would be the threats for like backhands, stuff like that. He only ever really like struck me a good 2 or 3 times throughout my childhood, as far as in that sense, being like hit with the back of the hand, closed, open, whatever. But it was a lot of threatening of it in between. Yeah, it was just kind of like a, remember I did this, and he was very strategic, because he's a very smart man. He was very strategic in making sure that the way that he worded things didn't sound exactly like a threat, so that if I did decide to tell anyone, it can be swayed in another direction. And he was like that all my life. It was kind of always like that, me feeling like I was crazy, because I was like, I know this is what I'm experiencing, this is what I'm feeling, but nobody else sees it. He acts a totally different way around everybody else. He like brags about me to other people like I'm just like the beacon of his existence, but then when it's us, it's like a whole different thing, and I didn't understand. So for years, I just kind of grew up with it and kind of dealt with it the only way I knew how to, which was just to not say anything. Like, just don't even bother trying to have a voice, because anytime I try to speak up for myself, it gets worse. Anytime I try to express any type of emotion, it gets worse. So I just kind of like had to shut myself off to a point to where he really didn't know who I was. Like, it was like the shell of a person that I had to be at home turned into my personality while I was at home. And it was like he got mad at me like I was faking who I was around other people and stuff like that. It was a lot, and my mental health got so bad. I hated it. I hated going home. I hated being there. It was just too much. So when I turned 17, I eventually, we had this huge altercation because there was a misunderstanding. I don't know why the principal decided she wanted to text me about something, but she got my phone number out of the little directory that hadn't been updated for like 3 years and sent me a text about something, and somebody else had the phone number. So they texted her back and said like all kind of obscene profanity, blah, blah, all this stuff. So of course she calls my dad, and then he goes off. But he like, I'm getting ready for prom this weekend. I'm at the nail salon. He calls and he like reads me for dirt. Like, and I'm not, because of how I grew up, I'm not the type to get emotional in public at all. In front of people, like I can hold it all. Nobody will ever see it. But I like broke down in that nail salon and had to like run out because it was just so much. And it was like I couldn't get a word out. I couldn't, like, he's telling me all these things that I did that I had no clue of. And I'm trying to like interject and be like, wait, like hold, like get some type of explanation, and he's just like going and going and going, like, and by the end of it, like I wasn't going anywhere, I wasn't doing anything. Of course, this is my senior year in high school. He's like, you're not like living on campus for college, fuck all that. Excuse my language, I'm sorry, but he's like, forget all that. You're gonna be right here. And like the idea of having to stay at home for another 4 years as an adult, I couldn't do it, and I got so overwhelmed in the things that I was feeling and all of that, and I knew that there was no way for me to communicate with him because he'd never listened to me. And I had to write out a letter. I wrote it and I gave it to him, and I was like, listen, this is what it is. And I wrote out everything I was feeling, and at the end of it, I was like, you can either let me go and let me leave, or you're gonna have to plan a funeral. And instead of having some type of sympathetic response to that you would think a parent would, he reacted almost as if I was putting on a show. And he was like, okay, fine, if you can find somebody that'll let you come stay. And I called the man that he had been with for most of my life, so he was kind of like a second dad to me. I had called him, and it was no question, and he came and picked me up, and that's where I went to go stay while I was in college. But it was like, while there was always a reason for him to stay connected to me, like no matter how much I tried to get away, because at the time when I was growing up, we were in public housing, and for him to keep that housing, I had to be on the lease. So once I moved out, it was like a guilt thing, like you have to keep coming back to sign the lease, even though you don't live here. You have to keep coming back to sign the lease because I did all this for you growing up and blah, blah. I took care of you. Nobody else wanted you, all this stuff. So you have to take care of me now, basically. and then it would be that, and then it was the, like when I was growing up, he would spoil me to be able to tell people I was spoiled, but he really just bought things that he wanted for himself to play with. Like, never once in my life did I ask for a PlayStation or an Xbox or any of that stuff. Only thing I ever asked for was like new clothes. Like, I just wanted to be cute. I was chilling. But he wanted to like get all this and this, and like one year he bought me like a whole new like thing to decorate my room and all this stuff, and I appreciated everything I did. But it was like everything he bought me, it was like he threw back at me later. He was like, well, I did this and this for you, and I did this and this for you. And I was like, I didn't ask for any of those things. So then once I got growing and I moved out, it was like more extravagant things. Like when I graduated from high school, he was like, oh, I'm gonna take you on a cruise, blah blah, all this stuff. But at the same time, mind you, that's when I had just moved out of the house. I was 17, it was prom weekend. In graduation, Michelle Obama came to my graduation to speak as our keynote speaker, that's the word. And at that time we weren't speaking all that stuff, of course. And of course he finds out Michelle Obama's coming, and all of a sudden, like, I'm obligated to give him a ticket. But not only to give him a ticket, but to give him 2 tickets so that he can bring his professor to impress at my graduation. And as irritated by all of that I was like, you know what, whatever, you've been here for 17 years. I'm gonna give you the tickets. We don't have to communicate. Like, you know, the group coming for me is not fucking with you. So just, we know this already, so just keep your distance. So he came, and then once we like gather and stuff after graduation, he comes and brings me my graduation gift. And I had gotten a car like 2 years before that, when I had turned 16 or 15, when I was trying to get my permit. Him and the guy that he was with when I was growing up, that I went to go live with, they had went half on the car pretty much. So both their names were on it and they were going half. But the day that I got my car, 2 days later, my dad lost his car key and drove my car for the next 2 years. I couldn't get my license. I couldn't learn how to drive. Any of that. He was just driving my car because he'd lost his car key. Magically, never found it, never got another copy. None of it. He just drove my car. So when I moved out, he kept my car, obviously. So graduation day, he comes and brings me my graduation gift, and it's the car key to my car. So I'm like, okay, cool. I got this as a gift 2 years ago, but thank you for regifting it. I appreciate you giving me my car back. Like, I'm still appreciative. Like, thank you, because, you know, I need this. I'm in college now, you know. So then he goes to the man I'm living with now, and he says, by the way, the car was repossessed yesterday. Here's the phone number to the lot for y'all to get it out. So your gift to me is the car that was supposed to be mine 2 years ago, that you took, couldn't keep up with the payments for because he stopped paying for the other half of it, realizing you were going to keep it. Got it repossessed and decided to give it back. But not get it out of the repossession and give it back and say, you know, I can't afford it no more. You want us to pay for it to get out of the lot because you couldn't. Okay, so fast forward, of course I'm grown, it makes me come back, sign the lease, does all these extravagant gift things like the cruises and all that. Fast forward, I'm 21 years old. I'm just gonna do this part real quick because I don't want this video to be super long. I'm 21, messing around with a friend, I end up getting pregnant. Mind you, I'm 21, I'm in my senior year of college. At this time, I had to move back home because of some stuff that had happened between them. That is another story. Trust me, I was not game for it, but I had no other choice. So I'm back at the house. I have no choice but to tell him because at this point, I've decided to try to keep it. When I tell you like that time when he gets mad and then like I have to hear all about it. So the night I told him about it, did not let me go to sleep until 4 o'clock in the morning. Yelling, screaming, all this stuff. Woke me back up at 7 o'clock in the morning. Yelling, screaming, all this nonstop for days. That on top of deciding that I now had to deep clean the entire house just at his whim, pulling out every chemical, every spray product, all of that for me to have to use around this house, knowing I'm pregnant. And then on top of that, told me he was kicking me out. So I was under the most stress of my entire life, because not only was I in this environment that literally gave me like PTSD with this man, I'm already in the stressful situation of trying to figure out how I'm going to be a single mother. But I know I can do it, because if you know me, you know I'm maternal AF. And I wanted to be excited about it, but the whole thing was ruined for me, and it started to make me feel so sick. And I ended up doing something that I haven't admitted to anyone except maybe like 2 people. And I ended up deciding to terminate my pregnancy because I didn't feel like I was strong enough to deal with what I was having to deal with for the length of time it was going to take me to get out. I couldn't. I was breaking down. And the worst part is, when I made that decision, I broke down worse. And mind you, I don't mean to make this a political video or anything, but I'm very pro-choice for yourself. So if you choose that for yourself, that's not something for you, but you believe other people have the right to do what they want, that's okay. That's me. I'm definitely like, do what you need to do for you. But it hurt me so much because I wanted to be a mother so bad, but the whole thing was ruined for me. And I couldn't see like a end of the tunnel with it, with what I was going through at the time. I couldn't. So after that shut him out, I couldn't. I ended up moving out, getting an apartment. That's when the abusive relationship pops up. This happens a couple of years later. But I ended up meeting someone while I was working, and it started out great. But then the longer we were together, the more I was realizing how much he didn't quite have his shit together, and meaning that in like a literal sense of life, and like mentally with his anger and everything. And after a while, it was like everything that was wrong in his life started to become my fault. And he would take it out on me and get angry at me. And because of the things that I've dealt with, if you are yelling and screaming and things at me for something that I haven't caused, it's too much for me. And I would ask for the smallest little bit of space, and it would be like the end of the world. And he would grab me and grip me up and like pin me against a wall and dig his nails in the back of my arms and beg me not to leave and all these other things, and threaten to kill himself, pacing around with a knife. And it was like, it was so hard for me to really find a way to respond, because I kind of like froze up for most of it. And a lot of it, I felt like he wasn't going to actually hit me, so I just needed to calm him down. But after so long, it got to a point to where I was like, I can't wait around for this. And I ended up deciding to leave him, but in that same time that I chose to do that, I found out that I was pregnant. And this was 2 years after the whole scenario with my dad and all that stuff. So that happened, and during all of our altercations and stuff, we had an apartment together, but he would get mad and take the money from me. He wasn't on the lease because of some personal things that he had, so he had no financial obligation to it legally. So he would just take the money and leave when he got mad. So I ended up having to leave there and go back to the original apartment with my dad. But at this point, he wasn't living there. He was living in a whole nother city with a fiance, and he had moved my best friend in as like bait to get me there. And then ultimately, me and my best friend ended up falling out from a lie that my father told her. So all this going on, I ended up finding out I'm pregnant, and of course I tell him. He's super excited, all this stuff, because, you know, he thinks we're about to have a family, all this. Like, his goal is just to keep me around. So my dad reacts the same way. But what ends up happening, because first and foremost, while I was with my ex, I told him about the abuse and things I was dealing with from my father, and he chose to take it upon himself to find him on online and address him about it. And of course my dad denied it, all this stuff. He decided to pop up at the apartment, try to do some like recording or whatever, because he's used to me curling up in a shell when he like approaches me like that. So he decided he wanted to do this like recording and all this stuff, like basically trying to make me deny everything. But I started to get to a point where I was tired of being quiet. So I was like, no, that's not true. No. And his thing that he does is if you're saying something that he doesn't like, he will yell and talk over you. So whatever his point is, he'll just say it louder than you to not even let you feel like you have a voice at all. So he would do it and I would stop. And when he'd stop, I would continue saying what I was saying. So by the time they finally met, when the pregnancy happened, they decided they had like this little agreement about how they were passing off the torch from him taking care of me to him taking care of me. But the crazy thing is, I have been taking care of both of them. Because while I was growing up, excuse the thunder, but while I was growing up, my father didn't work. He didn't do any of that. The little times he worked for like 2 months' time. Because he wanted to stay in public housing and he wanted to still qualify for low payments. So he didn't work. He went to school, but he was in school in the same program for pretty much my entire scholastic life, and then ended up leaving. Now mind you, he did get sick, but he was sick for a year. So like basically the assistance he got from having me is what paid for his survival and for him to chase this degree for 17 years or however long that he never ended up getting. And then when I got with my ex, none of his shit was together. I was the stable one. Like I had a salary job at the time. I was making good money. I had my own place. I had my own car. I was doing well. And then I ended up putting everything into us, and I lost everything. I destroyed my credit because I had to take out a loan to bail him out of jail that I never ended up being able to repay back. All these other things. I ended up back on the rent for the apartment we had together because he kept taking the money from me when he got angry. So they had that whole exchange, and I was just kind of disgusted with the whole thing, but I had to deal with it because I was bringing a whole nother life into it. I didn't have the stability to decide to be able to leave at that moment. But a few weeks later, I ended up losing our baby, and that was the day that he really put his hands on me. He didn't strike me or anything, but he threw me around a lot that night because I just kind of wanted to cry. I wanted to grieve and just kind of take a second, because we had spent hours in the hospital emergency room and nobody would take us in. They were just kind of like, basically like, if it started happening, there's nothing we can do about it anyway, so there's no point in us rushing you back here. So I'm just kind of sitting there like bawling, and to me, I felt like he was like more irritated with the fact that we were there than kind of in tune with what was going on. And I just wanted to cry, and it pissed him off that I didn't want to talk. And then as soon as he realized what was going on, the first thing he thought was, she's not going to want to stay with me anymore. She's going to leave me. So he decided to take it out on me and start throwing me around and all these things. And we ended up getting into like this huge argument the next day after I ended up actually going to the hospital. And I had to call the police. He like destroyed my apartment. I put him out. He like stole some stuff from me, ripped the nails out of my nail beds. He paced around my apartment calling me a dud, saying that I can't have kids. And after that, I'm gonna shorten the end of this because it's gonna be a long ass video. But I ended up having to go to court back and forth with the both of them, because as I tried to assert my dominance more with my father, he started to take it out more on me, like popping up and like threatening me, saying that I wouldn't be able to go to sleep, all this stuff, calling my job, all these things. So I kind of I was going back and forth with the court and ended up kind of just having to run. Like, I ended up just having to kind of let the whole court thing go, move, change my number, all that stuff, and just make the personal decision to cut both of them off. And I got a therapist during this whole time. I'm gonna make another video on this later, splitting up the two so that I can get more in detail, because there's a lot. But I just don't want this to be 30 minutes long. It's already 26, but yeah. I say all this to say that abuse is not just somebody hitting you. It's not just physical. It's definitely emotional, psychological, mental, sexual. And one of the best pieces of advice that I've gotten in my life actually came from my mother. And she told me, she said, nobody can help you until you're ready to be helped. And you can't leave until you've really had enough. Like, once you've hit your limit, you'll know, and you'll be able to get out. So all the doubt and stuff you have now, just really sit and think about how you want your life to be. And if you are willing to wait and see if tomorrow's the day that they're gonna kill you, because it's really not a if but a when in that scenario. And yeah, just it took me 24 years to get out of it with my own father, and over a year to get out of it with my ex. So it definitely takes you knowing when you've reached your limit with it. If you all have any questions or anything about it, or want me to go into detail about anything specific, leave it in the comments. Yeah, I'll link my Instagram and stuff below too, so that you can DM me if you need to. But believe it or not, this was a summary. But again, it was two going on at the same time, so it was a lot. But yeah, this was my story time for today. Yeah, make sure you guys subscribe. I know this one was a little on the more serious end of things, and I don't express external emotion a lot, so I'm not gonna like cry on camera. But yeah, if you guys have any questions or anything, just let me know. I'm gonna head out of this. See y'all.